All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for another MSDW Biz Apps Marketing Minute. I'm here with someone who I'm sure many of you know, Amiee Keenan, who runs the ISV Society. Amiee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure, welcome. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Amiee, you've been in the space for quite some time, and what I would love to know is, first off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the ISV Society is and what it does, and also, we'd love to hear about how you got your start in the Microsoft space and how long you've been in the space too.
Oh, well, I don't want to date myself, but I have been in this space since 1999. So there you go. Very long time. And so I've worked for numerous ISVs over the years, and I actually started in the Great Plains space back in the day. So but even before Microsoft bought it. So that's how I date myself. And I've learned a ton of things over the years and working for ISVs and building out channels and planning events and doing all the marketing and all the sales and renewals and you name it. I've pretty much done it from a partner perspective. And so that's kind of how the ISV Society came about, was because of what I've learned over the years and all the ISVs I've worked for and what I saw was missing in this space, especially around COVID times. Not that I want to bring up that word, but when, in-person events are taken away, and that's the livelihood of a lot of ISVs getting more leads, right? And so when that's kind of taken away from you, you have to come up with some creative things to do and other ideas and come up with things to do to replace that. And so what I learned is that working with other ISVs who are in the same boat was the best thing to do, was just collaborate and do things together and try to still make our numbers by doing things differently. And that's kind of how the ISV Society came about, because I saw that was a big gap in ISVs working together and doing things collaboratively and having someone be able to be that main point person to do all the things to make it successful and to launch it and create the content and all that. So yeah, so that's kind of what we do here at the ISV Society.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. So 1999, that predates me. I'm about late 2007, 2008.
See, just going to show you how old I am, and I'm not going.
But your experience is greater than mine, so I do appreciate that. So it's interesting how you say the ISV Society was kind of born out of the situation during COVID. I remember that as well, and it was definitely an interesting time for marketers. And I think there was digital marketing stuff available, but I think it was a really good time for people to kind of come in and innovate and provide new services to ISVs, which is really cool that you did that. In terms of what the ISV Society does, I know you gave an overview of it. Can you just tell me a little bit about how many ISVs you typically work with, and what's sort of the flow of each ISV in terms of how they actually engage with the ISV Society?
Sure. So I think I've worked with between 12 and 15 at any given time. Of course, that number can always change because I welcome any new ISVs to sign up, and we'll be launching 2025 initiatives soon. So hopefully I'll get some new ones signing up. And I try to make it as easy as possible when you sign up. So it is a membership, obviously. You can pay monthly, quarterly, or yearly. But most of the time, everyone pays yearly because it's just easier for me from an invoicing perspective. And I thank you for that. But just makes it easy for everyone. So
yeah,
basically, when you sign up, you get 4 joint marketing initiatives throughout the year. So break that up to at least 1 a quarter. And just, to fit into their marketing plans and strategy that they have. And then you get, to kick it off, we usually do a monthly chat, which is What's the Buzz series, which a lot of people know about because it goes to events and everything. And so that monthly chat is the second Tuesday of every month. And so we usually kick off with one of those, with the next one that's available, they'll do that first. And it's a great way to do that thought leadership, educational side of things, giving some educational content, sharing some buzzworthy information with the audience on Zoom and LinkedIn Live. And then those 4 different initiatives throughout the year, which I do all the planning for. So we do a lot of different initiatives, such as demo days after events. We'll do, like we did GP demo day, BC demo day, finance demo day after community summit. And so I plan out all of that, the dates, the ISVs, the presenters, the content, the images, everything. And then I kind of give a turnkey campaign marketing toolkit for everybody to promote it. The whole idea behind these being successful is that all the ISVs participating promote it, right? So if we're all doing our job promoting these initiatives, then they'll be successful. And after we have that demo day or whatever it is, then everyone gets the registration list, attendee list, poll questions, all that information afterwards. And then I send out the recording email. So I don't even have to worry about that. They just have to worry about following up.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. So I like the, it kind of reminds me of when I was talking with Anya Czerski, who runs ERP software blog, as you know, and she sort of emphasized the kind of community element of it, the joint effort by a lot of her partner members as well. So that's interesting to kind of hear that that's really how you like to run the ISV Society. And having, running a community platform as well, like MSDW, I mean, I can definitely appreciate that. So that's really cool that you do that. I know you mentioned COVID, and I know it's like you don't want to keep talking about COVID, but I do think it's important to sort of talk about it even now, just because so much evolved out of that from a marketing perspective. And I think there was sort of an old way of doing things pre-COVID, and then I think people really started to reevaluate what they want to do for marketing and where their marketing priorities lie. And I think there are some like basic elements that have remained, like from a strategy perspective, like everybody wants brand awareness, everybody wants to deliver a message, everybody wants leads. But I think people now have to be a lot more creative about the mechanisms that they use for that. So, there's definitely been an evolution. I don't think it's done evolving at all.
No. I think we have a lot more ways,
Yeah.
a lot of ways to go to make virtual. I mean, because we know virtual events aren't going away. Yes, in-person events are back, but virtual events aren't going away. We just have to learn how to make them more impactful, more educational, and bring relevance to the audience that we're serving.
Yeah. And that's another question that I had, actually. From COVID, there is now such an abundance of noise out there and information that people are getting, and you're really fighting for people's attention, I think, in their time, especially. So have you found anything kind of interesting that your clients are doing to sort of combat that noise and to, really make sure that when you promote them collectively as a group, the messages that you're using stick with their target audience and sort of help drive engagement?
Yeah. So a couple of things. When we do plan out any initiative, obviously they provide the content that they're going to cover, right? Usually I ask for a title, description, short description, so that I can build that into the content that we're promoting, whatever initiative we're doing. What's great about doing, like, say, a demo day, right, after an event, is we can keep the momentum going after that event. They have something else to invite them to. They have something else to promote at the booth. And so that just helps keep top of mind, first of all, keeps the momentum going, gives them something to invite them to, like I mentioned. And it gives partners and customers a way to see all of these ISVs in one place. So it saves both time, resources, money, all the things, right? They get to see, say, for Business Central demo day, we had 9 ISVs do 15-minute demos. So they get to go through and see 9 different ISVs in one shot versus having to go and do all the research on their own, go to their website, see their demo. So I feel like it provides a way for us as marketers, as us as ISVs, to promote something that gives people time back in their day and gives them a chance to see different ISVs they might not have even thought of looking at one point, or maybe they have thought about looking at them, but now they have the chance to actually see what this solution does, to see if it meets their needs or their partners meets their customers' needs. So that's kind of how the messaging goes when we do these different events, is how we do this collaboratively and how it helps people save time, money, resources, bandwidth to see all these multiple ISVs in one session working together.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of marketing efficiency, and
Yes.
I do think those collective webcasts where you can quickly view a bunch of different companies and their solutions in a very short period of time, I think is super
In an
helpful.
unbiased way, right? Like we are
Yeah,
the third
exactly.
parties, same as you. We are the third
Yeah,
parties. We are the outsider looking in. So it kind
yeah.
of gives them a little less like salesy type of mentality, or
I,
I'm not pushing on you, right? I'm giving you things that I think that would be helpful or useful.
yeah, I agree 100% with that. And I also like the point that you brought up about doing the demo day, specifically around COVID to kind of keep up that momentum. And it kind of sparked something where I think there are a lot of ISVs out there that don't necessarily do a good job of marketing pre-event or post-event. Um, and I'm curious to know, like, as a marketer, and someone who has so much experience working with these different ISVs. I mean, what do you think would be some cool tips for companies who want to really create a digital strategy around their in-person trade show presence?
Sure. Yeah, I love this topic. I could talk about this all day. But so, in-person events, as we know, cost a lot of money, right? We need to see that ROI there. And
Mhm.
when you have an in-person event, there is a lot of time, resources, everything you have to think about from pre to during to post. And it's so important to start that process as soon as possible when you have an event on that calendar, just to make
Mhm.
things easier for everybody, to have that pre, during event, post event strategy, right? And the one thing that I can say that I know many of us don't do or should do a job better is segmenting our list to make sure that we're giving them the content they want when they want it. So if you're inviting them to a community summit or whatever event it may be, do
Mhm.
you have your list segmented by ERP, by job role, by industry, so that way you can cater the messaging for them of what you'll be doing at your booth, right? So like, say it's manufacturing and I have this product that helps manufacturers do something. Well, I'm going to just talk about that to my list. I'm not going to talk about every product I have or everything
Mhm.
about what I'm doing, right? I'm just going to focus on the one thing that they care about. And I feel
Mhm.
like we get kind of construed in that where we have to send everybody everything because we might miss somebody, right? Or we might have forgotten about somebody, or we don't want to
Yeah.
forget anybody in the list or whatever it may be. So I
Mhm.
feel like taking a step back and looking at your database, your lists of customers, partners, leads, prospects, whatever, and how you can really make them segmented to bring them the content they want that makes sense to them on a
Mhm.
consistent basis.
Mhm.
It's
Interesting.
huge because
Yeah.
we don't do that. I don't think many of us do that. And I think because it's time consuming, as we all know, right? If we don't do it now, well, crap, now I have to go in and see, I have to
Sure.
go in and clean it all up. There's
Yeah.
tons of interns out there. There's virtual assistants. Like you can think outside the box of who can help you do this. Because once it's
Mhm.
done and you don't have to worry about it. You just have to
Yeah.
make sure moving forward, you have the right questions in place on whatever there's lead retrieval device, form, whatever, collecting
Mhm.
that information to keep going forward with that right content. But once you have it done and all caught up, it just makes it that much easier. Then you can really come up with a strategy for each type of ERP, whether it's BC, finance, GP,
Mhm.
and then by role, and then really hone in on the content that that audience wants. And you'll definitely see a shift, right? A
Yeah.
shift of hopefully better metrics versus what they were before, because you're giving
Sure.
them the content they want,
Yeah.
and keeping involved in the events and what you're doing at the event through that lens.
Mhm. I really think that's a great point. I'm a huge believer in being hyper targeted with really everything that you do as a marketer, because it really will yield better results.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I hope you don't mind, but
No.
I want to kind of stick for a minute with the sort of the pre and post event digital campaigns. So here's a little exercise that I think the audience would love. Can you put together right now for us an example of a good pre-event and post-event digital marketing plan, when you should start from the pre-event perspective, how soon after the event you should start the post-event activities, and how long should those go on for?
Right.
And the last part is kind of a loaded question, I think, because you really should market all the time. So it's not like you should stop, but I guess I think it would help me too to understand a little bit more about the overall structure of an example of a kind of a sample campaign here.
Yeah. And yeah, so obviously you're building Community Summit, for instance, that we'll use that event because it just happened as part of your overall digital strategy and into your email strategy and so forth. So it's going to play a part in the overall strategy. And so it starts in October, right? I would say you're already starting to plan it now because you already picked your booth. So you're already kind of in the trenches of doing that piece of it. But when we get to a digital standpoint, and obviously you have all these fresh lists that you got. So making sure those, again, segmented by the way they should be segmented. So when you start your promotion of Community Summit, I would say, depending on, I would say 3 months at least, start 3 months out with your email strategy or digital strategy and come up with some creative ways to get people to go visit your booth, to learn about what you do, whatever, if you have a session, if you have a partner solution showcase, if you have a booth, like all the different ways that you're participating in Community Summit, that needs to be broken out, right? And then you build that part into your strategy and what you're promoting. So say you're doing a session, an educational session for distributors. So you want to make sure that that just goes to the list of distributors, because obviously none of the other lists want to hear from it. Maybe you share some highlights from last year. So take lots of videos while you're there and highlight some of the stuff you did last year at the booth and some of the wins and some of the things and who the customers that came and visited. So a lot of what you did this year plays into next year. So hopefully you've got some videos at the booth of happy customers, happy partners that you can play into this digital strategy throughout the year and throughout promoting Community Summit. Hopefully you have some new kind of features or products that you can highlight. So you want to kind of build in stuff that you did this previous year, new things that you have coming, and then what you are doing at the event overall. And again, start that 3 months out, building up to Community Summit. And then obviously you're at Community Summit now. And so this is your chance to start all over again of collecting those videos from partners and customers, talking about the sessions that you're doing, making sure you have your lead retrieval set up with the qualifiers that needed with the right questions to be able to put all that data into your CRM for follow-up afterwards, and make sure people take good notes while they're talking to customers and partners. Because what a lot of times it happens with the follow-up is, I had this conversation with this customer, right? And it was about a specific thing. Well, you need to make sure you write that down and document it, because that's the best way to follow up with people, is obviously mentioning what you talked about at the booth or at the session or whatever it may be. So having really good follow-up, having really good notes and stuff at the booth when you're talking, when you're at the session, like all those things. The other thing for while you're at Community Summit, obviously doing Summit Land, I always say make sure that when you are scanning people for Summit Land, they go into a different bucket. If they're just there to get their Summit Land thing, stamp, whatever it is that they're doing, making sure you put in lead retrieval, they just came for Summit Land, because that will go into a different bucket of follow-up afterwards. So you're going to have at the event, when you're following up, you'll probably have 3 different buckets of follow-up, or maybe 4. You'll have sales following up with those immediate opportunities, the ones that said, yes, reach out to me, schedule a demo, whatever it may be. Then you'll have those interested ones, right? Then if you did a session, you'll have those that went to the session, and that will go into a different bucket. Then you have your Summit Land bucket. So it's a lot of different, there's going to be a lot of moving parts, a lot of different messaging after the event. So that way, again, you want to make sure you're giving the messaging to the right people by making sure you're segmenting them correctly based on what initiative, what they interacted with you at Community Summit. So a lot of that content can be obviously created ahead of time, because you already know you have a Summit Land bucket, you have a session bucket, you have people that registered interest bucket, the hot leads will get their own thing. So you can start all that content creation way before and just tweak it when it gets time to launch it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having the follow-up strategy be obviously, and inviting them to a demo day or whatever initiative too, as well. So adding that into the mix. So you're going to have all these different buckets, all these different emails going out simultaneously based on that criteria. And you want to make sure that you have I would say, depending on your email platform, setting up a sequence or a workflow. So that way you can really cater to the person. So if they opened up this email, maybe they get another email that goes more in depth of that topic. So you talked at your session, you talked about a specific topic, right? So you send an email to all of them. Well, they opened that email. Okay, great. This resource will make sense for them to have next. So they'll get that email. And if they didn't open the email, maybe you send it again. That's non-openers. I can't stress that enough. Sending emails to non-openers is also a great strategy to have.
Yeah.
So then you're really building upon that messaging. Now, for those workflows, I would do 3 to 4 emails, right, throughout those cadences. And then they go into the nurture series if nothing happens, if they didn't take action on any of those 3 to 4 emails, depending on what your CTA was. But really catering those CTAs to what makes sense for them based on what they do with your email. And like I said, a lot of email platforms do this. You just have to set it up. And it's, once you've it takes a lot of work to set it up, but once you have it done, it's done. But it all comes down to messaging, and it all comes down to consistency, and it all comes down to giving the content they want. Yeah,
interesting. And I like how you emphasize that there really needs to be an actual strategy when you're at the event too, because it's funny. Like I've been to a million events in this space, and more often than not, I will see people that are just kind of standing around their booth and they're not really doing anything. And then you have other companies who have booths there and they're scrambling around and they're always being active and they're doing something. And I feel like those are the companies. It doesn't matter what size booth you have. If you have a definitive plan and a strategy going into an actual in-person trade show, then, for when you're there, you'll be much more successful than companies that just feel like they can just wait for the attendees to come to them and there's not really anything that they should be proactively doing. So I found that interesting. But
of course, it could be more elaborate than that, but we don't have a lot of time. So I try to hone in on specific things to think about.
Yeah, no, that was a great example. Because once again, I always wonder how aggressive people should be when promoting their presence at an event and the things that you should do in a passive way leading up to the event. And I like your suggestion about, thought leadership webcasts and other digital activities that might hint at the presence there, but they're sort of building up that initial awareness and branding and messaging prior to the in-person trade show. And then having a much more methodical and strategic approach when they're at the show. And then after the event, really making sure that they're appropriately nurturing those leads consistently too. I find that, and I don't know if you've seen, I'm sure you've seen this, but there are companies that they'll get leads and they'll email them once and they'll be like, well, I didn't hear anything from these people and I didn't close 50 sales from the 50 people that I emailed. So, I'm just not going to email those people anymore. I think it's a huge
missed opportunity.
Yeah. And I think a lot of, I don't think there are as many marketers that sort of operate like that now, but there are still quite a few in our space who do that. So, and I think that's a big mistake. And I guess, when you have worked with companies that are members of the ISV Society, what are some of the mistakes or traps that some of these companies tend to fall into that you might have to sort of reel them back in? I'm always interested in hearing those kinds of stories too.
Yeah. Well, obviously being too salesy, right? Talking all about the product or the features versus flipping the script and talking about what the customer's needs and wants are and how you can help them. So kind of changing your messaging around to what the customer needs, what the customer wants, figuring out what their pain points are, what resonates with their audience, and doing the due diligence on figuring that out before sending out a bunch of emails that don't make sense or that don't talk to the person on the other side. They say B2B and B2C are different, but they really are starting to kind of come together and mold together because we are kind of going into the mentality of we're still talking to a person, we're still talking to a human. So we got to treat it that way, even though it is B2B. There's still a person on the other side, and we need to figure out what their needs are, what their wants are, what keeps them up at night, what pain points they have, how can we help them, what strategies, what tips, whatever it is, right? And how we can answer those questions they have and help them versus my solution does this and this is all the features that it has and we can make your life easier. And trying not to stick to the same messaging that everyone else uses because a lot of us do say, we help you save time, we help you save money. Okay, great. Well, how can you dive deeper into really figuring out how you help them versus the blanketed ones that everyone uses? And it comes down to messaging, it comes down to content, it comes down to knowing your audience, and we can all do a better job of that. I think we can all do a better job of consistency. So if you say you're going to send out a monthly newsletter, then send out it monthly. If you're going to start a LinkedIn monthly newsletter, then make sure it's monthly. And then video, I feel like we don't capitalize enough on video, a lot of us. So
yeah, I would agree with that.
And as you know, I did What's the Buzz videos at Community Summit. And just to give people an idea of why video is so important, especially on LinkedIn, is last year I did 22 What's the Buzz videos, and I got around a little over 8,000 impressions from that.
Wow.
And I was posting videos really every 30 minutes. Well, this year,
that's awesome.
I did 15 videos and got over 16,000 impressions in that week. So it just goes to show you that it works.
Video consumption is much higher. I it's funny you bring that up. I agree with that. We see that on MSDW as well, on our own video platform, that the on-demand consumption has just increased exponentially over the past few years. And I know you mentioned LinkedIn too, and I know you do a lot on LinkedIn Live. Do you recommend LinkedIn Live for marketers in this space too? Because I know what it is, but I'm sure there are a lot of ISVs that aren't really, they've seen it before, but they might not know how to use it strategically. So, do you have any advice for them on that?
Sure. So
I'd like to learn too.
Well, what's great, I mean, you can just do things on LinkedIn Live, but I like using Zoom with LinkedIn Live because then you can do it through Zoom, but it launches on LinkedIn at the same time and YouTube for that matter. So you could do a live event and have it go on all three platforms at the same time. So you're like getting three things done at the same time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting.
I would say as long as you're consistent, whatever your video strategy is. So if you want to start a video strategy like I do every month, What's the Buzz, then it certainly can be beneficial. It certainly can help. It certainly will boost your presence and build your brand. And it has to be thought leadership and educational. And it's easy. I want to say it's easy to do. It is easy to do from that standpoint. It's just coming up with the content, being consistent about it. Maybe you start a different series. You got to figure out what makes sense for your strategy and whatever you're selling and your solution is, but whatever kind of series you can do that builds upon what your focus is and how you help customers and partners, then build that strategy, that video strategy around it. Maybe you have partners come on once a month. Maybe you have a customer come on once a month, whatever it may be, but making sure you have some kind of video strategy in place next year, I think is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. That's, and I think that's a challenge too, that a lot of companies in our space have, is like, they know that they really need to do video somehow, but it's like, what do I do? What should I do? Product demos? Should I do?
And it all depends on what you want your strategy to be. There's no right or wrong answer. It's all, what makes sense based on what your strategy is and what you want to focus on. And you can certainly do 10-minute demos every month.
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Yeah.
But just, again, it's all about consistency, and maybe you take a survey of your list that you have and ask them what they want, or a LinkedIn poll and find out and gather information first. Or maybe you go through 2024's initiatives that you've done and what were really successful, or ones that weren't so successful, and how you can make them better or maybe make them stronger. So, but video will be an important part of anybody's strategy, or should be an important part of anybody's strategy.
Yeah.
And you really should start thinking about it obviously now, because we're already in November. Yeah. So, but if anybody needs help, let me know.
Yeah. It's funny when you bring up video about sort of fitting it into your overall strategy. I definitely see a huge importance and need for ISVs to do that. As I said too, I don't think enough companies really know how to use video effectively. I mean, one thing that I've seen companies, on MSDW do is do a pretty good job of having videos that really focus on, I guess, all stages of the buying cycle. So there'll be educational videos for people that are in sort of the information gathering stage. And then there'll be, case study videos for people that want to just, they know they know there's some issue going on at the organization, and they know what they kind of have to do. And now they want to hear how other people that are facing similar situations, what they've gone through and how they've resolved it. And then there's sort of that, product deep dive content, which really focuses on the later stage of the purchase cycle. So I think from a video perspective, it's really important to have all three of those types of videos created consistently. And you have to push them out all the time, because you're going to reach people at different times. It's all about timing. So it's like, you might reach John Doe, in February, and maybe they don't respond to your demo video at all. But then you send it to, John Doe again in May, and they're interacting with it now. They want to have a call with you. So it's like, it's all about the timing and where they are. And that's why I think it's really important to keep pushing out that content that focuses on different stages of the buying cycle, and not even just through videos, really through all different types of content too.
And repurposing it to different ways, right? And it used to be 7 to 10 touches, and now I think it's 15 to 22 touches now.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So you really have to amp up, unfortunately, on your content strategy because of just that.
Yep. And I say this to a lot of ISVs all the time. Even our clients too. You have to be doing activities that really cast a wide net, but a targeted net. And that means not just sponsoring trade shows or not just doing stuff with MSDW. You need to be very
everywhere,
thoughtful, and it's not
in a thoughtful way, right?
In a thoughtful way, where you're not just like throwing, buckets of money and hoping for the best, but you take a very strategic approach, and you want to make sure that you're reaching, digital channels that are able to connect you with their prospects, and you're going to the appropriate in-person trade shows, like Summit, as we're talking about. That will allow you to reach those people that prefer to go to in-person trade shows to get their information and research solutions and get educated. So, your marketing strategy cannot exist with just one of those.
Right.
You have to do all of them. And I still push that. I mean, I've been pushing that forever. So why don't you tell me, what we have stored in the future for the ISV Society, because I know it's a few years old, and I know you're doing stuff with the demo day. I know we've got a really cool webinar series coming up in January called BC Module Mastery, which is pretty awesome. Where do you kind of view how you work with ISVs in the next year or two, and what's sort of the vision for the ISV Society?
Gosh, I right now I have squirrel brain because I'm like trying to think of all the things that I want to do in the next few years, and I'm writing them all down. I'm like, well, I can't do all of this, so I have to just pick and choose. But yes, the module mastery, I'm excited about launching next year with MSDW. That's going to be exciting, and we already have people very interested in signing up for that. So definitely going to be focusing on that. I feel like collaboration with others is huge, as you know. So bringing in anyone that, makes sense to work with from that perspective and building out different initiatives with them is huge. Obviously building out my podcast and What's the Buzz even more, and making that more popular and just getting more eyes and ears on it is always my goal. For my different initiatives for next year, I am going to focus on a couple of different things. One of them obviously being demo days, but then I'm working on some other ideas I have in the mix. I haven't really flushed out all the details yet, but I'll also be doing, it is, like I mentioned, a monthly, quarterly, or yearly membership, but I'm also going to have some a la carte options. So in case you just want to test it out, right? And say, I just want to try a demo day first and see how it goes. And then I'll decide if I want to sign up for a year or sign up for more demo days or whatever it may be. So I'm just going to give ISVs a little more variety or offerings or whatever you want to call it, just to figure out how it fits into their marketing strategy and their budget versus going all in. What I can say, though, is that if you do sign up for the year, yes, I say you get 4 initiatives throughout the year, but most of my ISVs do way more than that, because obviously I am ERP agnostic. So we're going to do like 15 demo days next year. I think it comes out to 15. I don't know.
That's
a lot of demo days. So if you're a member, I don't really say, no, you can't do more than 4. If you want to do all 15, you get to do all 15. So you do the math, 15 for 5,000 or 15 times 800. So, there's a little flexibility there, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So, and then I'm going to be doing some, obviously, What's the Buzz at Community Summit, What's the Buzz at Dynamics Con. So trying to help ISVs just, get that video, right? Get that video element while they're at the events, right? Which is so important. So really helping ISVs with their video strategy at events. And then I'm working on some different kind of workshops. Either they're going to be industry specific workshops, and we might do both, industry specific, or they're going to be where I have I want to say ERP expert come in and share how they work with, like, say 2 or 3 ISVs, share their story, share how they use the product or solution to help their clients. So kind of like be that spokesperson for the ISV versus the ISV presenting. It's going to be the ERP expert presenting, and then the ISVs kind of like sponsor it, basically. That's my new thing I'm thinking about.
That's interesting. So they can kind of hear it's coming from an independent voice as opposed to directly from the organization. So it sounds sort of less of a sales pitch and more of like almost an analysis.
Right.
Of a particular solution. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And can you talk about, I know we mentioned the module mastery. Do you want to briefly just sort of tell the audience sort of what that is and what we plan to do together for that? That they might be interested in that.
Yeah. So basically we're starting with Business Central, and our first one will be in January. And we have 3 different ISVs that will be focusing on the finance module. So we will have a BC expert talking about the finance module, sharing some best practices, tips and tricks, things of that nature. And then the ISVs that play in different areas of that module. So we will have a reporting solution, we will have a payment processing solution, and a tax solution. And they will all share how you can do it in BC, maybe, and or how their solution helps make it better in those different areas of the module itself.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So it's really about focusing on the gaps within that module and sort of the lack of native functionality within the finance module. Interesting. And then having those solutions sort of say, hey, here's where, reporting sucks in BC, and this is why you should use, a solution like this to kind of compensate for that. I'm really excited to work on that with you. I think it's going to be really cool. And, I'm a huge believer that ISVs need to focus on selling against the platform that they integrate with, and less about selling against their competitors. I know it kind of sounds a little backwards, but customers are always going to look at the functionality of their platform before they look at ISV solutions, because they just made a large investment.
Right.
So you have to sell them on the reason why that, BC is really great, but it lacks in these certain areas. And, that's why the ISV ecosystem exists in the first place.
Yeah.
So users, my hope is with this series that we're working on together, that Business Central users will put ISVs first. And I'm pretty confident that that this series, especially the first one around finance, will help do that. So I think it's really cool. And then I think we'll expand out to other modules together, which will be fun. So yeah, there's some cool stuff on the horizon for that as well. Yeah. So I think but before we wrap up here, I think it would be really cool to hear from you about, if you are an ISV that is new to the dynamic space, what is the best way to get started? And not necessarily with MSDW or ISV Society, although that would be ideal. It's more along the lines of, what should they be thinking about from a marketing perspective? Like, where do they even begin? Because they might have experience in other ERP ecosystems, but when you start to know the Microsoft Business Application space, it's a very different animal. And sometimes you can't employ the same tactics that you have used in the Salesforce ecosystem or the SAP ecosystem. So, what do you recommend a good starting point from a strategy perspective for new ISVs to the Microsoft space?
So
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but I just think it's I love to hear this from different marketers, and I think you could provide some pretty cool insights into that.
I hope so. So first of all, working with Microsoft, I really feel like they have to take a step back and just look at the ecosystem as a whole and what they can do from that standpoint, who they can work with, what makes sense, who are the players, like really do some research. Who are the main players in this space? Who are their competitors in this space? What can Microsoft help me with? Because, I don't think enough ISVs take advantage, and I don't know enough about this, but I'm sure Khaled does, about working with Microsoft, right? And App Source and all the things that you can do out there from either a free perspective or even Microsoft funds, right? So I really think they have to hone in on that first, because there might be some free money in there, right? And how they can leverage Microsoft's platform and tools and resources. I would say start there. And then from there, once they've done all that, then they can branch out into the different areas. Okay, this is where I'm starting first. And then, of course, creating great content, right? That's key, and consistent content, making sure that they're building their brand, their presence on LinkedIn, going to the events that make sense. Like you have to really dive in and go everywhere, unfortunately, at first, because people don't know you. And so you have to just be everywhere, whether you're sponsoring or not. Maybe you're doing a session at an educational session versus sponsoring, or some way, shape, or form you're there, making your presence known and doing some type of initiative just to build that brand presence, build that recognition, letting people get to know you, because it's all about relationship building. So the best way to do that is obviously in person, is starting that business relationship with others, building that relationship with others in person, and then bringing that back into the virtual space. And then from there, then start looking at the different virtual opportunities you can do. Like you said, with you guys, obviously they can get in front of a huge audience. So that's a great way to get in front of the partners and customers they need to rather quickly. And then looking, like I have an ISV guide to grow your audience. So obviously you can look at that and see all the different ways you can work in the Microsoft space, because there is a ton of different ways. And you just have to figure out what makes sense from a budget perspective. But first start off with Microsoft, because obviously that's who you should be making sure you understand in the ecosystem, because that's who you're selling to, and how they can help you be successful first. And maybe they can't. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I know that they do offer a ton of different resources and funds and such to help ISVs and VARs, for that matter, and partners and SIs. So
interesting. Awesome. No, that's great guidance. And I guess my last question to you on top of that is, if you are a new ISV and you come into the space and you're so used to selling direct to customers, and you're like, I don't need to sell to partners. I don't need to reach partner. I want to hear kind of your opinion on this, but I always tell these companies, like, you need to have a hybrid approach, and you need to, market through partners and customers. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that, or is there something different you do?
I mean, I agree you should market to both partners and customers, but remember that every customer has a partner. So figuring out who their partner is when you start that sales process, if they're interested, because even at the ISV Society, and I'm sure you do as well, we market to both, right? We have partners and webinars attend all of our different initiatives. And, you're coming into this space, you need to build relationship with those partners. That comes first and foremost, because they're the ones that are going to help you promote your promote your product to their customers, right? And the other thing is it takes time. And so a lot of ISVs think this is going to happen overnight. And unfortunately, that's not the case. It is going to, this is a long tail strategy, not a short-term strategy. So it's going to take, I would say, 18 plus months to really gain traction, to really start seeing results, to really start building out that partner foundation.
Yeah, that is a phenomenal point. And I agree. That is one of the biggest misconceptions that new ISVs have, because they'll come in, and I've seen this a million times too. They had so much success in, the Salesforce space.
Or NetSuite.
Yeah, NetSuite or Oracle. And kind of wanted to say, but yeah, they had so much success in another ERP ecosystem, and they kind of expect that they're just automatically going to have that level of success immediately. And I agree that it just does not happen at all. They really need to give it, as you said.
And the right people in place to do it, right? You can't rely on one person doing the sales, doing the channel enablement, doing the strategy, doing the marketing, reaching out to partners. Like you have to have the people in the different areas to focus on the different things to make it successful as well. One person can't doesn't have the capacity to do it all, first of all. And it just doesn't make sense for a salesperson to do marketing. So, or vice versa, right?
Yeah, true. Good point. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Yeah. And share your story and the story of the ISV Society to our audience. So it's pretty awesome. And I commend you for, starting that during COVID. It's not an easy time, to start a business. So it's pretty awesome what you've done. So really looking forward to seeing how it continues to grow and evolve. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Bye, everyone.